This is Hot Mike. Hot Mike. On the networks of WDAY. Here's Dom Izzo.
Welcome back, everybody. Wednesday morning show rolls on. Our thanks to Goose Howell for coming by. Excited about another year of us televising the Red River Amateur. Coverage begins on Friday, June 21st. We'll be live. Hot Mike will be back at the golf course that morning to get you ready for our coverage that starts at noon on Friday, the 21st. Yesterday, if you missed it, big news out of the Minnesota State High School League. The story we've been following for a bit on here. The league signed off that beginning next season for the state basketball tournaments, boys and girls, and the state hockey tournaments, boys and girls, they will change the seeding format. It'll be seeded 1 through 8, no longer 1 through 5, and then 3 random draws. North Dakota did this for a while, and they finally changed a couple years ago. And now Minnesota will finally follow suit. So hopefully we've got the best matchups possible when we get to the state tournament. Maybe for some of our local teams, they're not facing the number 1 seed right out of the chute, because that's happened, it seems, far too often. Our pleasure to welcome back to our program Hawley boys basketball coach Nathan Stoa will join us this morning, appropriately enough from a gym. Before we talk about any of that, Celtics or the Mavericks, who you got in the NBA Finals?
Oh, I don't know. The pettiness of me says Celtics because the Mavs just tore my heart out and stomped all over it. But I don't know. I'm at the point now, if I'm going to click it on, I want 7 good ball games.
Yep.
Give me somebody in 7 so that we get one more game 7 here in the playoffs.
So you were the mindset that you thought the Timberwolves got through Denver, Dallas wasn't going to be any trouble, correct?
I don't know if I was that mindset. Anytime you put 2 of the top whatever players in the world on one team and they could take over a ball game that way, the Mavs are tough, and they did a heck of a job at the trade deadline shaping that roster. That those guys deserve a lot of credit for kind of reformatting that team a little bit. And like I said, superstars, man, those guys are at a next level for a reason. All
right, my last NBA question. Would you be a fan of the Timberwolves running it back then next season, or would you want them to change things up at all?
Oof, that's got to be one of those wait and tell me who you're going to change it up with. I don't know. There's a lot of guys out there that are, great stats on bad teams, guys that I think they fool a lot of us. And
good
I actually love the switch that I saw in Cat. Jeff Van Gundy for years said that you'll see when guys are invested in winning when they start defending. And he shot poorly in the Western Conference Finals, but man, that guy D'd up a lot in the first 2 rounds of the playoffs, especially guarding the best player on the planet in the semis. So I don't know, that left me with a little bit more glimmer of hope that those guys are truly invested and they could shape the roster around what they have. But
I said yesterday,
I'm also not paying the bills.
Yeah, I said that yesterday. Without Cat, they don't beat Denver. It's as simple as that.
Oh, for sure. And you know what? We could go back and we could look at a lot of guys that have had a lot of rough playoffs, in the past that are our superstars. Kobe shot 5 air balls in Utah and was 4-14 that game. He didn't just hang it up. The legacy's still what it is. And then, didn't Magic dribble out a clock once? I mean, you don't see that happen very often, but he's one of our top handful of players ever. So I'd say it's part of the process, and they can continue to build. But Tim Connolly makes the big bucks for a reason.
He does.
And at this point, I trust the man.
And he's
shaped around 2 good franchises.
He's going to be back again next season. That was the story that came out last night, that he agreed to another extension, at least till this time next year. Then who knows who owns the team by then? We'll hopefully have an answer on that. It's great to see
just another Timberwolves mess.
Exactly right, man. It's just another chapter in the Wolves saga. We were visiting off air. This is something I've talked about with various coaches in various sports over the last few years. It feels like a long time coming. What was the reaction among yourself and your colleagues about the news that came down yesterday?
Well, I got to give you a hard time and be self-deprecating at the same time. You decided to bring on a guy that's never experienced the state basketball tournament from the sidelines, so this whole seeding process is foreign to me. But anyway, hopefully we get to handle it sooner rather than later. But no, it's something that I think's been coming down the pike for quite a while. At times, especially growing up in North Dakota, and there's some imbalances in just population disparity and size of schools and things like that. When you throw a major metro area and how players get to different schools and just there's a lot of things to flesh out in that situation. Sometimes those first rounds of state get a little wonky at
Yep.
times. And so I know that that's been some of the issues. I think that it was probably well in the works before this year, but I think that the Stewartville having to run into Totino Grace when they could have probably given a ball game to every single team that advanced past the first round. They definitely weren't coming across in the coaches' seedings as the 8th seed. And so I think that was maybe one of the last straws. And of course, as basketball coaches, we always joke that, if you need to make a change in the state, got to change it in hockey first. And that's a little bit of tongue in cheek. And I just haven't paid enough attention to know if there's been some imbalance there. But we know we've got, in a 2-class system, especially, how that's going to split teams up. I'm sure there's been some imbalance in the opening rounds of the hockey tournament where teams that, would be seated in that 5-6 range questionably, because if you're a 5 seed, you could be a 6 seed, you could be a 4 seed. We know that it's, there's a lot of splitting hairs on that. And so, just with some of those hockey powers too, I'm sure there's been a few of those. So it's going to be a good system, I think. And, you get to the state tournament, if you're the 8th seed, or you're anybody else, you're David versus Goliath in that first round anyway. So, let's try to get it as true as we can through the process that they have. And, trusting a lot in Coach Critchley Sr., as I stand in the gym that he helped build, he's stated over time that the process he feels has been true to the ways that he has seen it going, and the attention that he's paid. And so now we're just going to get it to be true all the way through instead of random.
Well, I look at it, especially out of your section, where even Pelican this year had a really, really strong team. I don't think they ever sniffed of getting a seed, right?
It's always weird too, because so much depends on what happens in the rest of the state. If we go back one season, Lake City, who beat Pelican in the first round and then lost in the state finals this year, they're probably a seed if they get there the previous year, but they get upset with 1.7 on the clock and PEM beats them, and that's where the DGF matchup comes. And so it's it's one of those, it's tough, because especially when you don't get a lot of score comparison type games too. And so if the thought is that the power is, say, down in the metro, then that's sometimes hard for the outstate teams to overcome. And then there's going to be other times where, what are we judging this off of? Are we judging this off of, Prep Hoops and who they say the top 10 was at the beginning of the year, and that's where we start and we juggle from that? Or are we truly, sitting down and looking at score comparisons or what we believe the power is? And, coming from, there's leagues all across the state that are good competition, but if I take a look at where we were, we had to go on the road in the second round. We were a 7 seed. Well, we had Pelican, we were in tight games with Pelican both times. So there's a little bit extra when you come from leagues and sections that maybe are a little more balanced and compete really hard. And coaches do what they're supposed to do in that process. And you could take a bad loss a loss that looks bad across the state, but we know darn well it wasn't a loss that was bad, because that's just how our league operates and our section competes. And so, you hate when things like that might hold people back. So trying to get the truest set of information out there for everybody is probably the biggest key.
You foresee better matchups then, Nate, that we get the best teams to play later in the tournament, that we don't get, because this happened, I know, for years and the Class B in North Dakota, that sometimes the championship game will be in the first round and then they went to the seeding and we alleviated that. Can that happen on the Minnesota side?
Yeah, I think we're talking about, minor adjustments on this one, because we've had some really, really good games, especially, in some of the more enjoyable games when you've got a Totino sitting there in a Class 3A, knowing, that the game that they're playing and the game that Alexandria is playing, as far as how we get kids, right, wrong, or indifferent, isn't the same.
Nope. Yep.
But so you get a Mankato East Alexandria game, which was a heck of a ball game. And I'm not going to say De La Salle and Totino wasn't. That was a fun ball game too. But sometimes we might lose some of that in a championship game atmosphere from time to time. We didn't this year, but every once in a while it gets that way. But I know exactly what you're talking about in Class B. There was a lot of times where, the powers met in the semis, and that was unfortunate, because that was a lot of geographic, setup. And so hopefully that's alleviated a little bit, and we see some improvements there. And I think it'll trickle down and maybe be a little bit more effective in the Class A and the Double A to get them seeded out that way too.
And this is a completely biased point of view. I'm going to say that now, but it seems more often than not, the teams from our coverage area are always the random draw teams. I know Fertile got seeded this year. I think they were the 3 in Class A. That's the first in a while that I can remember. DGF made its great run. I don't think they were seeded, right? Then they made it to the champion or the semifinal game, right?
Yeah, I want to say that PEM was the 3,
right.
so then DGF would have been unseeded. And sometimes it comes from the upsets that have happened over here. We've been on the right side of it, we've been on the wrong side of it a couple times. There's things happen, but when you're in, like I said, when you're in our coverage area, I really feel confident in a lot of our coaches and a lot of our conferences and the sections over here that you're going to have good games all the way throughout league play and section play. And you're going to beat up on each other a little bit, and you're going to be tested, but unfortunately, that might come with, you might sneak someone into the state tournament with 6-7 losses, and that not how you got the losses, but that you have them, unfortunately puts you into that open draw space.
I had the pleasure of doing the 8AA games back in Concordia. The Heart of Lakes is growing again. Tell me about the new teams coming in, how that's going to change things for this upcoming year.
Yeah, we're a little more travel time, but on an expanded schedule. So Park Rapids coming in. So the Mid-State fell apart. I think Pequot left and went to the Granite Ridge, which makes geographical sense and competitive sense for them. And so that left Park Rapids, Detroit Lakes, and Staples Motley without a home. Crosby too, but Crosby I think found a way into the Great River. Where I was when I was in Pine City. Yeah. So that's going to span quite a bit, but. So Park Rapids and Staples coming in. I think most of our league played Park Rapids already, but now it's going to be a home and home. And Staples is kind of be the fresh trip for most of us in there. But it'll be nice. It'd be nice for the ADs. Anytime you get more league games, that's easier to schedule, and it should add to the competitive balance of our league too. I mean, Staples has some young kids coming up right now in a basketball tradition. And then, Park Rapids had a great run last year to move themselves into the league. So, it changes the footprint of our league a little bit, changes some of the tradition of the league a little bit. But I think in time, when I first got into the league, when I was in Ulen, there were 10 teams. And Ulen-Heyerdahl was one of them, and Lake Park was still in, and so was West Central area. So it's not the first time we've seen some transition in that. But so just add to the competitive nature of the league, add to some of the travel time. And then one of the things that the league is doing, which I am super in favor of, is we're playing a lot of Thursday night or Friday night doubleheaders with the girls. Okay. And I just think that that's going to add to the atmospheres in our gyms. We're not going to play conference games where we're split and one's at home and one's on the road late in the week. We're going to be able to, it'd be good gates and stuff like that, but more importantly, should be loud, fun gyms to play in for both the girls and the boys. And then selfishly, I get a chance to watch the girls when I don't have to think about scouting or anything else like that. And we get to kind of become one big program as opposed to being split.
Can you call the Summit League? Can you make that happen? Please.
You know what? I don't know what college sports can do to fix themselves, but part of it was they just thought it was going to work. They was just going to keep working the way it was with no foresight. And then, now we're left with this mess.
Last before I let you go, year one of the shot clock. How'd it go? Why did you think it went in Minnesota, in your opinion?
I thought it went awesome. I didn't have any, I don't think we went anywhere where the shot clock was like a negative issue where people were struggling with resets or anything like that, or nothing that I noticed. Maybe I just was too absent-minded to it, but I was really happy. Our table crew was awesome and what they were learning with it. I like the resets to 20 at different times and in those situations. And I thought it added to some of the strategy of it. We had, once that clock hit 12 on both offense and defense, our strategies adjusted. And, we had part of our scouting report and part of our practice prep was to have a turbo call in there that changed depending on our opponent and our situation. And we were able to, use that to help us make plays at the end of clocks. And so I just added to the strategy that we were doing. I thought pace of play was good and we didn't have anybody 4 minutes to go up 8 trying to sit on the basketball. And even better, Coach Gottenberg used to say this back in the day, when we were fighting, and everybody thought he was going to be against the shot clock because of the teams that he had that advanced to the state tournament. But the fact of the matter is it took a little pressure off our shoulders. It wasn't when do we sit on the ball and when do we start going, Carolina, let's go to the four corners. It was how do we execute? And then therefore in practice, we got to make sure we're prepped and ready to execute in those situations. And, some days were hits and some days were misses, but I thought it added another layer of enjoyment to game prep.
Shot clock. We got seeding at state tournament. Welcome to the 21st century of Minnesota basketball. All right, way to go.
Hey, we're getting there now. If we could just fully, I never want to stop. If we could just fully get to the college women's rules, they got it figured out.
I'm
That's
with
the
you
one
there.
thing college,
I am totally with you.
I love the college
Yes.
women's game.
Quarters, absolutely. Yes. Let's do it.
Yep, and then reset those fouls
Yes.
so that we can get back to pace of play and we don't
Yes.
have to walk back and forth for bonuses.
I like that idea. There we go. Good to see you, bud. Thanks so much for the time. Have a great summer. We'll catch up soon, okay?
Sounds good. Appreciate you, Dom.
Nathan Stoa joining us, Hawley boys basketball coach, this morning on the news of the State High School League. Changing things up. They will seed all 8 teams, not just in basketball. Going to happen in hockey as well. And I know Coach Stoa mentioned that tongue-in-cheek, but it's clear if you need something to happen, it needs to happen in hockey. They did it, and now it's come to fruition for next season. We'll take our final break. We'll come back. We'll wrap things up. Remember, Bison Media Zone on tap at 10:30. Much more on that. We'll come and put a bow on things and a few emails to get to as well. We'll do that right after this.